And likewise to you, sir. Mr. Speaker, the battle lines in the upcoming November general elections could not be clearer after the speeches yesterday by the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition. And Mr. Key's government really is asking the country to trust it while it plans to sell the assets that are already owned by New Zealanders to private investors and to corporates, which, as sure as night follows day, will end up in overseas ownership over a relatively short period of time. That is a fact, and members opposite in their speeches have not exercised that from the debate at all. That, in fact, will happen, and it seems that the other side is quite happy with that, knowing that that's what will happen. National governments have always been keen on hawking off assets rather than creating them. When it did try to create them once under Think Big, they did try to create some assets once under Think. The members' own electorate had some benefits out of this. Think Big fell flat on its face, except for one or two successes. Most of them were unsuccessful, and it took years for that debt to be paid off. The government is asking the country to trust it when it guts early childhood education. It believes costs have increased too much that the level of support provided is now unsustainable. That's what members opposite have been saying. The government is not telling New Zealanders under what conditions will the subsidies be increased. And maybe the next speaker might take this up. When will it be okay for us to support our families with children when parents have to work and who require early childhood education and childcare? When will that happen? It is not telling New Zealand what level of support for working parents and with young children requiring care is acceptable. Maybe the next speaker will tell us that. All it is telling New Zealanders is that what was available under Labour is now unaffordable, so you'll cut it. So that's what the members opposite and the government opposite is telling us. The government is asking the country to trust it when it scraps home help for thousands of elderly. What a mean-spirited government. Do they really care about these people? For hundreds of them, thousands of them, that little bit of care and assistance that makes life bearable has been cut. When they deny access to counselling for victims of sexual assault, and when it dumps thousands of people from surgical procedures under ACC, it's asking us to trust the government when it makes those kinds of cuts. The government is asking New Zealanders to trust it when it cuts over $50 million from industry training and using it to fund the shortfall in university places. The government effectively has no plans for upskilling New Zealand's workforce because it has dumped the $180 million skilled training strategy developed by industry and institutions together. It was developed by training and the institutions together, and so they should be at the table. They are the workers. They developed it. They agreed on it. It was funded by the last government. That was not good enough for the anti-worker government opposite, so they cut it. National should be ashamed that half of all Maori and Pacific teenage girls leaving school are unemployed and not in further education or training, and more than a third of the boys. Well, what's the answer? The members opposite. New Zealand has seen previously what happens when it is prepared to write off a generation of young people. That government opposite has done this before. They are not concerned about these young people migrating from underachievement to unemployment to crime. They talk about it a lot in the election campaign, and they talk about crime a lot, but when there is an opportunity to actually ensure that the bedrock assistance required to our young people and our children is there, they're not interested. When this happened previously, when they cut assistance from this generation previously, it took a long time for them to recover, and many never recovered, and we may still be reaping the downside of that. Why are we visiting these risks on the present generation of young people beggars belief? Sometimes, Mr. Speaker, it feels like this government is playing a game. This is most evident in health, and day after day when questions are asked and the answers given, it is a game. the government has presented its targets for elective surgical procedures, emergency department waiting lists and cancer treatment times as progress, when in many cases this progress is absolutely manufactured. What you do is cut in one area of the hospital, you move the resource into another area, and it increases performance there, and you say, look how well we've done. But they're not intellectually honest enough to tell us the full picture. No, that would be too difficult. After 2.25 years in government, Mr. Speaker, people are beginning to suspect that this government has no plans and for increasing the workforce, for addressing these issues, and they are becoming very, very hard to trust. Why should they believe this government that already has a track record for a long and growing list of broken promises? Many will remember that the state services were not to be cut. John Key said he would cap numbers of state servants. It has already been cut. And you know what, Mr. Speaker? In the next period, they intend to drive it further. Now, all of a sudden, this service has become bloated, inefficient, etc., etc. Well, this they've done this before, and subsequent governments have had to return. This government, Labour governments, have had to return and rebuild the public service. And they promised not to do it, but this is what they'll do. This government has promised GST will not be increased. Now, no matter how it tries to resile from that promise by circumscribing the context in which it was made, no one believes the government. GST is disproportionately affecting the less well-off and those on limited income. This is the group that this government does not care about. There are plenty of figures, Mr. Smith, you've seen plenty of figures, and you know where they are, so read the previous. Talk to the people in our electorate, go and see those on limited income, ask them what are the effects of the tax switch and the GST increase, and the member will know. If the member just keeps on talking about the wealthy in his particular electorate, then maybe you will not see that. Essentially, Mr. Speaker, this government does not have a plan that the country can identify with and accept at all. Perhaps what is most alarming, Mr. Speaker, is that this government does not have a heart. No one believes that the government does have an intimate understanding of the pain that many New Zealanders are feeling and what many more will feel if these cuts bite deeper. The plan that has been presented is formulaic, predictable. That's what Conservatives do. Don't create, cut, slash and burn, give tax cuts and expect the market to perform. It never performs, Mr. Speaker, and somebody else has to come back and fix it. Mr. Speaker, Labour's vision is for a society where everyone has the potential to achieve to their fullest. Labour believes in investing in its people. Labour believes that it is our families that produce our workers, and they must be factored into everything we do. We believe that just focusing on the economic side of the argument is not enough, the investment side of the argument. That has happened before, and in the end, our people suffer, difficulties emerge, and our society is less safe in the long run. We believe in a strong economy, we believe in creating jobs, but we also believe in supporting our families and our communities that partner capital to develop a great society. Let the speakers from that side balance that equation. At the moment, it's just a few factors in the economic area. Labour believes that we should all contribute in a manner consistent with our means and accepts that in many cases we need to invest in our human capital to get a return as a society. Our policies will be fair. They will not ask some people to wait to get attention when good times return. We will use all our resources for all our people. The battle lines have been drawn up. It will unfold this year, and the unbalanced approach of this government will be exposed, and we will see what happens on November the 26th. Thank you.
Shane Arden.
Mr. Speaker, it's always a privilege